So for today, we have our Echo, and Echo is going to share. So she's one of our master coaches in stage one. And now that we're getting through all the 7 stages, right at the end of stage 7, there's a rebirth moment and it goes back into stage 1. So Echo is actually going to share about endings and death and rebirth and what comes through that and transformation and the transition moments in life. Um and part of that is through her deep levels of experience, and also in our program she focuses a lot on trauma work and trauma healing. And so she has almost like this full spectrum of experience, and she's been doing a lot of work in this space. So with that being said, Echo, thank you so much for being here and welcome to Metamorphosis.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, I feel really giddy to speak today and to be here. It's so interesting to get excited to talk about endings and death and change. And I had a lecture yesterday with my own school, and it's funny when you said a full spectrum, the school is called Full Circle. So I was like, okay, yeah, we're like in alignment. And as these things do, I've had the last weeks, I've really, really given myself the space to just not be productive, to just exist and to be in being. And I'll speak to a situation that I have, been presented by life in the last week that just metaphorically comes into the training in such a beautiful way as it does. So I feel like last time, as I moved into the space of sharing, the metaphors that came through, they were very present with me. They weren't things that I was drawing on from deep in the past. They were in the moment. And as we speak about endings and transitions, today I want to speak a bit about anicca, which is the Buddhist philosophy of impermanence. And actually, it means so much to me that I made a bracelet with the name anicca on it that I wear on my wrist. And it is also the connection to death. So on the bracelet, anicca beside it. And so it's consistently with me as like an ally, so that I really appreciate the experience of life, knowing that everything is impermanent, that everything is shifting, that everything is changing. And a very real, potent situation arose just 5 days ago. And in the last few months, I'm also a studying death doula. So I've done my death doula certification last year. I'm in a deeper mentorship this year, and I'm really working to really bring life to death education and to change. And so when we hear the word death, we can get really uncomfortable with it, but we're okay with the word change. We might not like change, but we accept that the word exists. But the moment the word death comes in, our bodies have this somatic reaction to it. We might start to feel a tightness in the chest, and we might start to get shallow breathing, and it might bring up memories. The word that comes through it might remind us of loss and grief. And so I encourage, as I share and as we move through this topic today, really tune into how your body receives the words, how your body receives the message. And it's a moment to rewrite. Every moment is a little death. Every inhalation, every exhalation, every moment is a death and a rebirth. And observe as your body receives information, and allow yourself to remain as open as you can. Every opportunity that we have, we can step into that observer role and notice like what we are conditioned to accept and what we are conditioned to resist. And I'm going to look at the chat box as well sometimes. Yeah, deep breath. So it's so important that we notice when there's contractions in the body or there's tension in the body, that we take that breath in. And one of my biggest mantras in life, and I teach this in my yoga classes and meditation classes, and when I'm doing healings with different clients, is to take it into your own mind. And the moment that you have become unpresent, or the moment that you resist or you contract, you repeat in the mind, or if you want to say it out loud, you can, but repeating in the mind of breathing in, I am aware that I'm breathing in, and take a breath. And breathing out, I am aware that I am breathing out, and breathing out. And just continuing to do that until you can really like settle into your body. And this practice is so simple, and it's something that I use every single day with when I'm in the world and I feel exposed to sound, or I'm too or whatever it may be. I remind myself, like, breathing in, I am aware that I'm breathing in, breathing out, I am aware that I'm breathing out. And having that awareness, especially as a death educator, of the closeness of impermanence, it's not something that's far away. You know, we distance ourselves, we get sick, or we something happens, we might feel a little bit of tension in our body, it might remind us of our fragility. But a lot of us, like, being at a certain age, we think that death is really far away, that we all get to live to an old age. And that's a gift. You know, it's a gift to get there. It's a gift to, you know, just like Chelsea spoke of this new relationship, it's a gift to be gifted a new relationship. It's gifted to move through a relationship and come to an ending as well, because an ending really can become transition if we allow it to be. It doesn't have to be an ending. And so the little story I'll share here before I get into the three parts of the Buddhist teaching that I wanted to speak to is, yeah, 5 days ago, a dear friend of mine is visiting me in a small village in Japan. And I invited him to stay for a few extra days because I was DJing a set in town, an ecstatic dance. And so he stayed. He decided to stay 2 more days. And 2 days before this particular day, I had taken him on the mountain, and I do backcountry guiding, and I ride a lot of risky terrain on snowboard and ski. And I showed him a part of the mountain that was out of bounds in the backcountry. And I said, "This is a very safe spot that I'm taking you. But the moment that you traverse too far right, and if you lose yourself, if you lose your marker, it's the point of no return. There's no coming back from this point. And you don't come out here alone, and you don't come out here with a transceiver, you don't come out here without avalanche gear." And 2 days later, I was gone for a day in another village in Japan, and I received a message at 3:20 in the afternoon, and it was a voice message that was 3 seconds, and all it said was, "Yo, testing." And on that, I didn't think anything was wrong. To me, it wasn't a plea for help. But what I didn't know was that it was followed by many, many messages that never made it to me because his phone went out of service. And there were messages like, "I'm lost in the backcountry. I need help. Like, let me know what I need to do." But the day went on because life goes on. As somebody is suffering, and as somebody is moving through a transition, as somebody is facing a death, we move on with our lives. Life is like cyclic. We're constantly moving and constantly changing. And so as my day went on, I wasn't worried about him, but he didn't show up to the dance. I thought this was odd. He was. And by 10 p.m., I had let go of him being okay, because I thought this is not in his behavior to not come back and to not let me know what's going on. So I knew at that moment that he was lost in the backcountry. And so we called the police. We tried to get people to go into search and rescue. And even as I say the story, I could feel my body tightening because my own resistance to mortality, you know, my own feeling of what does it mean to be lost in the wilderness. And as you know, the night went on, no one could help him. And basically the question was, can he live through the night? And it was a scary question to be asked, because whenever you're asked that, especially in these situations, it's not about does this person, and it can be, but it's not necessarily about can this person live through the night with the resources they have. It's about the mindset. So can this person live through the night? Is this a person that persists, and a person that has tackled their own like mental demons and can make it through a night in the elements? And in that moment, I felt a bit more hopeful because this person is somebody that's deeply on his path and has done a lot of work. I didn't know what resources he had. But the point here is he made it back. And around 1 a.m., he had hiked himself out 12 hours out of the backcountry. He made it back. And from like this sheer force of human power, human desire to live, like he just kept telling himself one foot after the other. You know, I'm not going to give up. Just 1 foot, 1 foot, 1 foot, 1 foot. And he made it back to the top of the mountain and he skied down. And as soon as he saw another human, ski patrol just happened to be at mid mountain at 1 a.m., he just collapsed. And to me, this was such a metaphor for no one is going to save us. We have to do the hard work. Each of us and each of you in this container, you're hiking up that mountain. You're in the backcountry. You are like doing the hard work. And we can be here and we can be worried about you and you're going through your feelings and you're going through the things and the changes, but we can't save you. We're all here kind of search and rescue for each other, but we can't, you have to walk yourself back up the mountain. And the moment that he did that, he did it. He took one step after the other. And the moment he saw another human, he didn't even ask for help. He just collapsed in vulnerability of like, I've done my part. Now help me. You know, it's kind of like this, here's my body. I need help. And so he got to the hospital and all 10 fingers have like suffered necrosis, which is like the killing of all this tissue. And so we don't know if he gets to keep his hands, but he's in treatment now. I'm going to see him after this call, actually. And he's still in that mindset that he's going to. I've seen people have just as bad of frostbite as he has that have lost their fingers. But I feel that because of his mindset, because he has been walking up mountains, you know, metaphorically for many, many years, that I think he will get to keep a large portion of his hands and his fingers. And the reason that I wanted to speak to this is because the aftermath of that, you know, he comes out of the backcountry, he's alive, he's laughing, he's in the hospital, we go to visit him, and you could feel this outpouring of love, this deep love, unconditionality. There's no holding back, you know, even the people that barely knew him, so much love, so many tears, so much joy. And I just thought, how interesting that because we almost lost someone, all of a sudden now we care. All of a sudden we are pouring love. All of a sudden we can be vulnerable. But how many of us put up these barriers and put up all these walls, these obstacles for people to hurdle themselves through before we can actually give them our trust and our love? And it's not to say to just go out and give your love everywhere and pour yourself, but there is this illusion, I think, in the way that we've created the human condition around just pushing death and pushing change so far away that we have our routines, we create the things that make us have this false sense of safety. And it's not until we're faced with death, until we really see it, or we experience somebody that might go through that experience, or we feel, or we go through an illness or disease or such a deep heartbreak that we're so broken open, that this gratitude for life, this unconditionality pours through us. And this leads into what I want to speak about today, which is the concept of anicca, impermanence in Buddhist philosophy. And you don't have to be a Buddhist to appreciate and to hear these words. You have the opportunity every day to hear, you know, religious texts, secular texts, philosophical texts, shadow work, whatever it might be. We have the opportunity to be exposed to a plethora of branches, essentially. And something that I love in Buddhist philosophy as well is they say there are a million paths. You just have to pick one, and you have to pick one that has heart in it, that has love in it. And if that path has heart in it and that path has love in it, you continue on it until it doesn't, and then you change routes. But something, again, in the human condition, we have such a resistance to these little deaths, such a resistance to these little deaths. And, you know, the paradox here is that for some of us, I know when I sat in my first death and dying retreat, we contemplate on death, there was feeling that if I even thought about it, if I wrote my will out, if I contemplated or meditated on my death, that I would actually manifest my death, that I would bring it closer to me. And what I realized is actually contemplating my death and like sitting with embodying and going through these meditations where you would actually envision and embody your last breath, like breathing in and then exhaling and then resting in the nothingness and embodying that one day you will experience that. It gave me such a beautiful connection to life. But there are so many people that will not even go into that practice because the fear of even facing that is so difficult. And so the Buddhist teachings say that when we can sit with anicca and our impermanence, they have three characteristics in Buddhism that they speak to that are really important to note. And that is of anicca, impermanence, dukkha, which is suffering, and anatta, which is the no self. And the more that we allow ourselves to go through changes and to go through these little deaths, and basically, my feeling towards when we go through these little death and changes, we do a course or we get into a relationship, or somebody that we love dies, when we fully feel that, when we fully embody the grief of what that means and the celebration of what once was, we expand, like our sense of being expands from self to presence. And when we can kind of step back from the individual form, the individual ego of I and me and what I want and what I don't want and what's comfortable and what's not comfortable, and we can simply or complexly become a field of presence, when I can expand outside myself and become a field of presence. And of course, we can't always rest in that. We're not all awakened, enlightened beings. There's been few that have walked the earth that we know of. But when we can more and more tune into that field of presence, all of life becomes an experience. It doesn't become, this is pleasurable, this is painful, this is good, this is bad. It becomes, oh, this is an experience, and this is an experience, and this is an experience, and this is an experience. And there's an enjoyment of the duality and the polarity of the human experience, because we're here in like Chelsea said at the beginning, this full spectrum. I feel that we're really here to feel that full spectrum of things. When we can detach a bit, and the Buddhist word for this is parigraha, which is not attachment or possessiveness. But our biggest attachment, our biggest possession is our bodies, ourselves, our idea of what self is. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to speak to today, and the idea of changes and transitions came up, I thought how interesting that so much of our growth comes from endings. So much of our growth comes from like deep heartbreak. It comes from death, and mostly in life, I feel, at least for myself, the endings are where it's at. In relationship is beautiful, and there's so much to learn in there, and the relational aspect is amazing. But it's in how I handle the endings that I really meet myself. I see where I cling. There is this clinging of what I want to keep and what I don't want to go. And I thought, how interesting that the biggest attachment in life will be when I actually have to break up with myself, my concept of self, when I face my own mortality and this being that I've caretook. I get to be in this form. I get to present as Echo. I've made all these agreements in life to, I'm in a female body, and I am a teacher, and I'm a yogi, and I'm a dancer, and there's all these agreements, because that's basically what our personality is. It's just an agreement. I make an agreement to be this, I make an agreement to present this way. And all of those agreements, when we're facing that last breath, I have to even detach from my concept of what it is I believe myself to be. And can I know in this moment what that's going to feel like? No, I can make a simulation. I can do my best to embody it. I can go into meditation and try to feel that. But once we fully detach at that point, I try to see it as not losing something, but returning to something. Sartre, existential philosopher, amazing philosopher with many beautiful teachings, my favorite phrase that he says is essence precedes existence. And maybe that hits you, maybe it hits you, but if it doesn't hit you, I'm going to let you know why it hits me. But Sartre's whole idea around existentialism comes down to this one sentence, that essence precedes existence, meaning that, say you want to drink water, you create a cup because you want to put the water in the cup so that you could drink the water. The only reason that the cup exists is because of your need to put something in it to drink or to eat. You create the fork because you want to eat the food. The essence of what you need is the creation of that material. So the reason that this hit me hard is because that essence precedes existence. To me, this means that humanity, there was some reason that we needed to come into form. There was some reason that humans needed to exist. So, like the water in the cup, we put consciousness into form and created these individualities, subjective experiences. And so my whole outlook in stepping more into that space, into death education, into existentialism, into the greater perspective of being outside of just I and me, it has made all of life such a fantastical, psychedelic experience. And it comes down to you have to figure out what it is that you believe. So many of us, we have different philosophical beliefs, secular beliefs, religious beliefs. It's about like really, really tuning into what it is that you believe and then deciding for yourself, what is this meaning for you? Like what does this mean? And to grow is to change. To grow on that path is to change, is to constantly accept that the branches of the tree of our life, they're going to shift, they're going to go up, they're going to keep branching off and moving up. And the easier that it becomes for us to accept, to bring in aparigraha, non-attachment, the easier it is for us to accept change, I find the more risks that we're willing to take, the more that, and to love is risky, to offer ourselves in devotion is risky. The more that we can accept change, the more risk that we will take. And I think the revolution of the circle, as we cycle from one lesson to the next, the faster that gets, we accelerate. And I know for my own growth, I see the acceleration of what used to take me, like 6 months to get through. Now it will take me 3 months. And what used to take me 3 months will now take me like 2 weeks. And what would take 2 weeks will now take me a minute. And so that cycle, it's faster and faster and faster. So to come in full spectrum, it's like I can just open my heart and love and risk it all and allow myself to just be in it. Because when you think about it, so many people will say, oh, I don't want to get into a relationship because I don't like breakups and it's so painful. And I think your whole life is a relationship, your whole human life. That's like saying, I don't want to live because I'm going to die. You're going to die. That's absolutely 100% true, unless science creates some magical way for us to keep our bodies permanence forever. But the reality is that to live is to also die. To love is to also leave. Either that relationship is you leave it consciously because you go in a or you lose that person through sickness or through death. But that's a part of the agreement that we've made in the human experience, is that beginnings mean endings. And a metaphor that came through for me, I feel like I live my life very metaphorically, which is really beautiful being a part of this course, because I'm like, metamorphosis, of course. I was thinking about years ago, I had a certain medicine journey where I was out in nature and I used to always pick flowers and I would put them in my hair. And I picked this flower and the water splurted on my arm. And I've probably used this in my classes in this course as well, so you might hear this metaphor twice, but I realized I killed the flower and I was devastated in that moment. I'm this hippie out in nature and I'm crying because I've killed the flower to put it in my hair to be beautiful. And after that, I decided I would never pick a flower again. If it fell on the floor, I would take it, but I would never pick a flower and take its life just because I thought it was beautiful. And only recently did I have a dream where I realized that my belief, anyhow, is that in a giant pool of consciousness, like whatever presence is, whatever life means to you, the Godhead consciousness, when we come into life, we're plucked from the pool of consciousness. And I was like, oh my God, the human life is literally a flower. You literally pluck you pluck a piece of consciousness from life and you put it into a body. And I was like, each body is a flower. And I was like, each person, you know, you may be an orchid, you may be a dandelion, you may have a longer lifespan than others, but you are already born out of that dying. Like just by being plucked, you are given an existential nature that you have an ending. So by taking you away from what is all encompassing and is permanent, that state of consciousness, by taking form, you have also chosen death. You have chosen endings. And so it's so interesting to me now, looking back at who I was, you know, 10 years ago, who I was 20 years ago, so uncomfortable with change. And I thought it is in my very nature to change. It is the ultimate reality that I will change. And I look at how we create things, even, you know, we do programs and we want to have certifications and we want to have diplomas and we want to, we gift ourselves something so that we will end things. And I notice it in everything, you know, whenever somebody leaves after 40 years of service in the army or 40 years of service in an organization, they're given a severance pay or certain rewards for what they've done. And we've had to pad endings. We've had to gift in the acknowledgement, like you've gone through thing. We need to pat everyone on the back because there's such discomfort in that ending of like, no, it's okay. You get a diploma or you get a certificate or you get a plaque. And so we have given all of these kind of illusory safeties to what it means to end. And in our ultimate ending, when we die, we don't get a plaque, we don't get a diploma. And because we're so conditioned in that, then death becomes so tragic. You know, I hear so many people when I speak about loss and I speak about somebody dying, I'm like, wow, that is a tragedy. It is like, wow, that's so terrible. And I think it's sad. Like I love that person. I love that form. I love that life that I have, but that is also your existence. Like this is also your experience. And it's a beautiful part of life when you look at the fact that when someone departs, something else comes in. Constantly, people are being born and constantly people are dying. Like we have to make space for life to keep moving. That is the cyclic nature of life. Let's take some breaths. A lot of words. So deep breaths in. And maybe that mantra breathing in, I am aware that I am breathing in. And breathing out, I am aware that I am breathing out. Just a few more of these. And just imagining if you feel that you can be in that space, like taking an inhale in and holding it for a moment, holding that life force in, just pausing with it in the body, relishing it. And as you breathe out, breathing everything out, emptying, holding at the bottom, and just feeling what it feels to be in nothingness. No life force inside, but still alive, just empty. And notice if you can find beauty in that, if you can slightly smile, expand into nothingness, allow yourself to just be fully open to change. And when you need to, you can breathe in again. Come back into the space and just deep gratitude that the breath, it continues to come right now for you. It's here. And this is something that we take for granted every single day. We wake up and we go into our chores or we get on our phones. But this is the one thing that we're not talking about, that for those of us that are alive, that we're consistently gifted every day from an unknown source, that the breath continues to come. Your breath is there, and everything that you do to love, to live, to get angry, to experience ecstasy, joy, sexuality, loss, change, all of the things, every single one of those things needs one thing, and that's breath. And we're each so fortunate enough right now in this moment to be animated, to be form, to be in material world, to walk, to be in this container of consciousness that our body is. It's just containing what exists everywhere in that consciousness. At this moment, we're the caretakers of these precious bodies that are shifting and changing each and every day. Yeah, something to contemplate here before we go into a little Q&A is, if you were to think that your death was close, something I try to stay in is that I try to live in a place of death being within 6 months. This is something I've agreed with myself. If I were going to die in 6 months, how would I want to live my life? If I were to die in 6 months. And so when you're in that place of really sitting with that, like, oh, holy shit, like 6 months, that's it. What would I do? I feel that I allow myself to be loved more. I allow myself to receive love more, to give love more, to tell the people that I love them, to clean up my messes, to not leave things unsaid. And also, it's made me a lot more fierce. It's made me, I don't care if people don't like me. I don't care if I say something that's my truth and my authenticity and somebody judges me for that, because if I were to die in 6 months and I didn't say what I saw, if it was an injustice or an indifference or a lack of compassion, I would be really disappointed with myself in those last moments of breathing in and breathing out, that I was fearful. I would judge in that moment. And the closer that I bring death to me and the more that it has become an ally, the more beautiful my life has become, the more I actually live. If I think of myself as flower of consciousness, I've blossomed. I've really become what it is that I imagine and it's still becoming, but what I imagine is my highest in this form. It's like, okay, this is what I got. This is the form that I've got. What is in my absolute highest that I can achieve here, that I can feel here, that I can do with this voice and with, these movements and with this love. Like, this is all I've got to give. These are the only, agreements, like the only agreements that I can give come from this space. So how can I do it from the most authentic place? So yeah, I really encourage you that if you have a resistance to change, if you have a resistance to things ending, something that my therapist told me a few years ago, because I was coming out of codependency and not relating in a healthy way before I started my own work on this and coaching and doing therapy. She was just, what was it that she said to me? I've gone tangential, and so I have to bring myself back. Mm, mm, I've lost it. This is gone. But um, when endings come, new beginnings come as well. When we think about even farming and we think about the land, it's, big crops come and we have so much food that comes and so many beautiful things from nature, but it takes time for the soil to kind of rebuild itself and to regenerate itself. And so from that, giving that spaciousness, something else is like born again. And again, what I was saying earlier around the more that we're able to move through that circle in an accelerated rate, we don't have to suffer so much. Dukkha, like that word that I used earlier, the concept of Buddhism, suffering. The more that we accept change, the less suffering that we have to feel in cyclic existence. And so we just allow the waves to come. We allow the waves to come, and they don't crash on us so much anymore. They still come and it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good, deception, or it doesn't feel good to be rejected or to be discarded or to have people say unkind things about us. But at some point, we realize that that is not even us anyway. And we stop taking it so personally because, again, we realize it's just another experience. So I want to leave space here now for any questions or reflections. And so grateful to be here with each of you. So grateful that my friend has made it out alive to live in form another day. And so grateful for him to be a metaphor for how I opened the space today. And yeah, grateful for change, grateful for death, grateful for these rebirth moments. And yeah, grateful to be here.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for sharing. I'm curious if anyone has a question, you can unmute yourself or put it in the chat. I'll start off because I really loved this prompt that you shared around if I were to die in the next 6 months, how would I want to live? And I'm curious because I know you've done a lot of death retreats, you've meditated on death, you've been doing 2 death doula courses, you've been going
Mhm.
really deep with this. I'm curious how your relationship to death has shifted, and also how can you take this practice and like what can you actually do with this practice? Like right now, I'm just sitting here going, "Oh my God, there's so many things that I would fill my life with." And I'm just curious where you've taken this because there's probably so many, if you've done it like multiple times, like where could this take you?
I think the biggest shift for me is um, coming out of deep, deep trauma and coming from like the biggest wound of childhood abandonment and rejection, which I feel like so many bodies have, like this abandonment wound. And in a way, it's almost like an abandonment wound from like maternal energy because we live in this beautiful body of our mothers and then we come out into the world and we're given this existential nature and it's like okay, figure it out. It's just like, what am I doing here? And you think of every child comes out crying and screaming, and it's just like, what am I doing here? But then they get conditioned and they think, okay, this is life. This is where I want to be. But I always think, isn't it interesting that every child comes out crying because maybe they liked where they were, maybe whatever consciousness was, wherever that space was, they wanted to be there, but they just got used to this. And so for me, that abandonment wound has made it really difficult for me to love. And now when I enter into new connections, like you were saying, Chelsea, I think I used to have this when I was younger, this idea of like, let me play it cool. Like I've got all these things, like we'll just be casual, we'll take our time. And I'm very slow, very, very slow to connect. But also I just like put it all out on the table. And I'm like, this is what I believe in. This is what's important to me. Because instead of being, this is who I am, because I don't think I am anything specific. I am a becoming. Nietzsche talks about this in Thus Spoke Zarathustra. And he says to call a human, like to call a being a human is a disservice. He says a human experience is actually a becoming. You're a process at best. That's the best way to describe. And so what I let people know now that come into my life, either through intimacy or through friendship, is like, this is my becoming. This is what's important to me at the moment. This is, what I feel. This is how I try to like, really experience my life in a certain way. And I'm very quick to either dive in with somebody or to say, this is not what I want. Because for me, I'm like, if I only had 6 months, is this where I want to spend my energy? So I feel that my friendships, my loverships have like jumped up levels. And I've also, done a big social media cleansing. I went into Instagram and Facebook and I was like, we spend so much time in the metaverse. And being an online teacher, there's this paradox of that. But I went through and deleted thousands of people off of Instagram, hundreds of people off of Facebook. And I just don't have to look at their things. I could just keep them there. But I was like, no, energetically, I want to clean anything that's coming into my field because if I only had 6 months to live, I only want to see the shit that like inspires me. I only want to be in connection with things that like really light me up. And so I'd say the way I've used this the best is a lot of house cleaning, energetically, materially, of the heart, like lots and lots of house cleaning. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's super amazing. I really love that. And that gives me such a deep perspective. I definitely feel that with relationships, just entering new relationships, there's this like needing to protect or this fear or these like stories that come up, and it's just like just laying it all out there. Yeah, it's very edgy, but also beautiful.
Mm.
Okay, who else has a question they want to share based on everything that they just heard? What's a lie for you?
I don't have a question. I just wanted to acknowledge you, Echo, for, it's been a kind of a crazy day for me, but just hearing this and giving me the perspective, giving all of us this perspective of like, yeah, we could die in 6 months. What does that mean? And really being introspective about that and saying, well, I wouldn't be doing this, or I wouldn't be talking to that person. Like, it's powerful stuff. It's such a simple question, and wow. So just thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have another question? This is like such an interesting topic. Does anyone have maybe a strong, maybe I have another question around, the fear of death feels quite prominent for a lot of people. And I think that there's so many ways to experience transitions and losses. And I'm curious for you what the number one thing that you've done to help almost like edge your human into being comfortable and accepting the process of endings and death. Like I definitely feel myself padding endings. Like I I feel like I do it for a reason. Like it feels healthy. Like even in every relationship I've ever had, I create these really amazing closing ceremonies and try to just make the ending as special as the beginning and like put so much intentionality into that. But I think there's a part of me that fears the process of transitioning and loss. So I make it really special so I don't have to feel it as deeply.
Well, I think that what you said, like I also, being a ceremonial, ritualist and working with plant and animal medicines, like endings are very important to me to ritualize and to also, like you said, do ceremony and to celebrate. And I think it's up to you to go inside. And just like you said, there's a duality. Like you want to ritualize it because it's special and it's beautiful to you. And also that there might be a little bit of fear of transition. And I think it's okay to have that duality. But I think it's also beautiful to be introspective of like, oh, I want to I want to do something here because it's special to me and it meant so much to me and I want to honor it. And I have this fear, and like look at both of them. And by preparing for your death, you are padding your ending because you don't know when death will come. And by contemplating on it now and by having it close and by, breathing into, oh, what would it feel like to actually take my last breath? And, what would I want to do before I die? What would I want to say? That is your preparation because it can come spontaneously at any moment. So in that moment of the last breath, no matter how spontaneous it is, or if you know that it's coming, there will be a celebration around it because you will have prepared. You're the ritualist of your own death in a sense. And so for me, writing out my will and knowing that like I don't own a lot in the material world, but I have things, I have resources. By writing out even, my favorite earrings or necklace and these kind of things, leaving them to certain friends that I know it would mean so much to them. It cost $5, maybe one of these things, but to know that I wanted them in my death to have that thing, it brings excitement to me actually, that when I die, it's going to be like a big, celebration for all my friends because all these gifts are going to go to all these places and money will go different places. And so I think, who knows, but when death comes, there will also be the duality of fuck, what's coming next? And then also, oh shit, I'm leaving so much good stuff for my friends and I wrote all these love notes and there's all these things. There's going to be so much joy. And so for me, I think that will pad my ending because as I transition, I will know that I'm transitioning with love, that I like left the world with love. Yeah.
I love that. That makes so much sense.
And I'll probably be very scared, just like you said, like the scary ending. I'm sure I'll be going, holy shit, where am I going? Like what is this transition?
Yeah, I felt that at the end of my closing ceremony. It actually felt like I was coming up against death. I was like, this is probably what it feels to die when you are celebrating everything from the relationship, yet you're leaping into the unknown and this relationship is gone. Like we're gonna wake up tomorrow and we're not living together anymore. And that was so scary to just switch it was like a death. I was like, wow, I'm celebrating this so fully. And I guess the other thing that's coming up, and I would love to open this up to other people because I'm everybody has to say on this. But there was this movie, Coco, you know it? This movie around it's one of my favorite movies and actually it's like a Disney movie and I was like, oh, I don't know if I want to watch this, but Day of the Dead came around in Mexico I was like, I've been living in Mexico for 4 freaking years and I don't know what this holiday is about. And so I watched this movie around all of the cute little kids and the families, and they put out all the photos of their grandparents. And on the Day of the Dead, the grandparents can walk across the bridge and come back to life and celebrate one time in the human world and like be ghosts and play. And if their picture isn't posted, their memory is lost and they actually disintegrate out of that world. And so it's like when your memory die, when a memory of that human dies, it's like your last death. So that was really interesting, just like really honoring the ancestors. I'm curious if in your work you've had connections to life beyond life, in connection to ancestors or in connection to beings outside of you, just because you're so close to the life and death worlds.
Definitely that those realms get very strange and very mystical and very animistic. Something that I was gonna, it brought it up for me when you were speaking, is I saw this, it was like a prose, like a short prose that somebody wrote. And my feeling again is that I feel all of life that has ever existed continuously around us. Like from my perspective, there's this feeling that I have been here, millions of times before. It's in so many forms, and I feel that about the people that I meet. And I feel the more that you become aligned, you see yourself and qualities of yourself reflected everywhere. It becomes like such a mirrored image in the world. And I saw this prose and it said, what if, and this is thinking about reincarnation, what if those that are alive now, they read books that they wrote? What if they live in cities where they built the buildings? What if they, walk on streets that they put the cobblestone down? What if they walk through jungles that they served medicine in? Meaning, like, what if we are constantly connecting with things that we've created in other lives and in other forms and other ways? And I think the more that I go into this work around death and around Bardo realms as well, like these different states of being and different energetic bodies, um, I realize there is so much that we do not know. I love that we have science. I know that we are so good at using our intellect to put ourselves into so many boxes and to put everything into words and to create so much so that we could feel safe to have this existential experience. But the reality is that none of us actually know what we're doing here. And we have religions and we have all these things that tell us like, oh, this is what the human being is. But in reality, you don't remember, unless you're a very unique being, and I don't know many people that do, your point of creation. You don't know exactly when you were created, and you don't know what's going to happen to you when you die. And you are just living in this form that you have no control over. You get to take care of it, but you've just been given this gift. You have a heart that you'll never see. You have organs that you'll never see. You have processes, thousands and thousands of processes moving through you that you aren't really a conscious part of. And when we think of self and we think of our center, we each have different connections to that. Some people feel that their center is from their eyes, some from their heart, some from their belly. And so this is a very, very existential experience that we've just made a lot of agreements to. There's a lot of agreements that we've made to being like, this is what's happening, but we don't really, really know. So I guess to answer your question, it's confusing. I leave it in a confusing of, I just don't know. The deeper I go, the less I realize that I actually comprehend about the whole thing. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. I would love to have one more question, and I would love for it to come from somebody in this group because we've been going so deep. Even, Allison, if you want to chime in on anything that you've heard. Yeah.
Thanks. I've been listening to everything tonight. I feel like, the reason there is a veil, we're not supposed to know. We were created to not know so that we would put all our energy into the fullness of life instead of, it's almost like we were designed to have this fear of endings and change so that we would desire life more. And also, I don't know if that makes sense to anyone, but also I read in the Gene Keys that in a certain point in our evolution, we won't need bodies anymore. Like the body is something that helps us reconcile or gives us the understanding of the duality of like the masculine and feminine energies, and the reason why like we have the bodies and we want like these deep intimate relationships is because we're craving wholeness. And eventually when we get the understanding of wholeness, that we won't need the bodies anymore, and we'll just be existing in consciousness. And I just think like all these different perspectives, I don't know how to reconcile them all, but I feel like it is fascinating, and I love like exploring all of it. And I also love going into near-death experiences, hearing those people's recollections. They're always fascinating. And then the stories of people that do remember the previous lives to the point where they come into this world and it's able to be verified. Like there is documentation of the things that they're recalling that they would have no logical reason whatsoever to know this information without, at their age or, based on their resources, et cetera, their network. So yeah, it's just really fascinating. But I just wanted to say thank you for holding the space for us to have this container tonight.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's super beautiful. Echo, did you?
I don't have a question. Oh,
Can you still hear me? I think my internet for a second.
Yeah, I think the internet dropped out for a second, but did you get to hear Allison's reflection? Yeah. Okay, and Desiree, I think you had a question.
no, I didn't have a question. I just wanted to give lots of gratitude to you, Echo, because I think this session was really, really powerful, and there's so much to reflect on. In some ways, you've allowed me to see things from a different perspective, but it's also reminded me that that's deep down, that's how I see things. And 6 months ago, I was having thoughts to myself about what am I what am I giving birth to beyond my physical body, but spiritually, like what's in that next phase cycle. So I felt so strongly back then, but then life, conditioning, everything kind of clouds that. You kind of forget about that. And so today's been a really beautiful reminder of that. So I'm definitely going to be sitting with this for a little bit and then try and come back to it every now and again. So thank you so much for sharing so deeply.
Thank you. And Chelsea, can I say something to what Allison shared?
Yes.
I wanted to speak to just quickly with what you said about at some point there will be such an expansion that we won't need the human form anymore. That's come to me a lot, in the sense of, I thought I've let myself go into, what is possible after death, after the death of form. And what I have experienced in some psychedelic experience, and also just really, really deep meditations, is, especially in some psychedelic experiences where it can be really painful and there's purging and it's really challenging, I experience every emotion, like every human emotion coming in. And what I noticed, especially working with one specific medicine, which I work with, which is 5, is that it feels like you're being pulled from the inside out. Like it feels as if you're pulled from the inside out. And when I first worked with this, I literally felt like I was obliterated, like the first 20 journeys that I worked with it. And I thought, why, life, do you want me to work with this medicine? This is brutal. It's painful. It's like so challenging. I don't want to do this. And when I came to understand, because the calling kept coming and the medicine mystically kept pulling me back in, and the world had already opened to me around medicine and like more mystical and magical realms. And it was like, this, you're here, you're like doing the work. And I knew that I was going to do it, but I was resistant. It didn't feel good. And so what I came to understand after, working with it for a few years, was that what was coming online was I was feeling every single human experience in a moment. But because I was in this limiting body, because my body wasn't used to having all 30 trillion cells turned on, that I, with my mind and my ego, was immediately going, this is bad, this is uncomfortable, this change is bad, I am dying. But in reality, all that was happening was a transition. I was being given the opportunity to feel everything at once and expand past the limitations of the human body. But because of the fear in the mind and my connection to my ego, I was not allowing myself to have the experience. So it took me going through that, dozens of times over many years until finally I took the medicine, and it was like I told myself as I took it in, I surrender to this experience. I surrender to the shift. I surrender to this change. And when I did, it became orgasmic. The same exact experience that ripped through my body, that obliterated me, also absolutely enlivened me. I felt like just an orgasmic pulsating wave. And then I could tap into that more every time I worked with it. And I thought, holy shit, it's this ego, this mind that immediately experiences something sensational. And it goes, this is too much. But it's only too much, in my belief, because we too little allow ourselves to feel. Like, we don't allow ourselves to feel that much. And we're so capable of feeling so well beyond the physical form. So I just wanted to speak to that. Thank you, Allison.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for sharing that.
Wow, thank you. Oh my gosh. Well, we're at the top of the hour, and I know, Echo, you are on a rescue mission right now as we speak. So I would love for all of us to unmute ourselves and to rub our hands together and to give Echo the big possible we can.
Ashe.
Thank you. And as we say here in Japan, arigato gozaimasu. Thank
Beautiful.
you.
Thank you.
For being here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your words. This was freaking profound. I'm so grateful for you. And I wish you the best journey in helping your friend and kind of in the mental space, the physical space, the emotional space of his fingers.
Thank you. Have a beautiful day or night, everyone.
Thank you.